And good evening. It's 7 p.m. on February 25th, 2020. I'll call this meeting of the Stowe Board of Selectmen order. I feel like I have to shout in this big room. If I talk like this, can you all hear me? Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. So I'm not going to speak to the empty room. We will begin our meeting as we always do with public input on anything that is not on the agenda. Anybody have anything? All right. I think that makes about 1,053 meetings in a row that we haven't had any public input on anything. So I do have some chairman's comments. The Town Hall Restoration Committee is holding a public forum on the future of the Stowe Town Hall on Wednesday, March 11th at 7 p.m. The purpose of the forum is to share recent construction estimates, $3.5 million, and gather input from interested citizens and current or potential user groups on the level of restoration effort to be taken at the various locations throughout the building. The forum will begin with an overview of the status of the project and will follow with time for questions and answers. If you're interested, please contact Doug Hyde, but again, that's Wednesday, February 11th at 7 p.m.
February 11th? At the Town Hall.
I'm sorry, March 11th at the Town Hall. More informally, this is really important. If you want to have a voice in this, essentially $3.5 million is far higher than anyone expects us to get, and some decisions have to be made. So this is the chance to come in and have some input on, let's face it, one of our biggest town assets and a real piece of our legacy here. So again, March 11th, 7 p.m. And there was an open meeting law training workshop provided by the Office of the Attorney General. Obviously, this is of most interest to people who are on committees, but not just those people. That's a tone. Wednesday, March 25th, here at Pompo, from 5:30 to 7:30. And I've been to a few of these. These are very good, and they do hang around, and they do answer questions. They don't just lecture. And I also wanted to remark on the passing of a former town employee and volunteer. Beth Toby passed away this past Sunday morning after a long illness. Beth was probably best well known as a volunteer for the Council on Aging and a member of the Council on Aging board. She also, Bill and I were just reminiscing about this, she headed up our IT department when our IT department was pretty primitive. And it was a tough job, and she stuck with it. And she got us to where we are today, and she did some great work. She was also the secretary to the Finance Committee for a very long time when I was on it, and Peter, some other people, and she will be missed. And I wonder if we could have a moment of silence in memory of Beth Toby. Thank you. All right, let's get on with our agenda. And first thing up is the minutes of February 11th. Maureen, thank you. I had a couple of very small things. I probably should have gotten them to you earlier. On the motion to approve the January 28th minutes, you've got Tom seconding it twice. You want to take out maybe the second sentence. Down below, when there's a motion to appoint Kathy Sfera to the Open Space Committee, it says I move. So you have to put in the name of whoever actually did the moving. And there's no second for that one. And then in the discussion on the motions for the Town Administrator Screening Committee, Maureen, where Tom moves to appoint Craig, there's no second. And where I move to appoint Deb, there's no second. I didn't have anything else. Anybody else have anything else? Mr. Burke.
No, I'll wait.
Was there somebody else?
I actually have a note on your note on the January 28th minutes. Actually, it states that Mr. Ryan moved and seconded. And so maybe that can get picked up.
There you go.
I have notes on these.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else? Mr. Burke?
Just briefly on, and I only do this out of a sense of duty to finance. I said the finance committee has not met. It hadn't met in the last week.
I'm sure they were deeply offended. Were you deeply offended? I'm sure you were. Horribly. Horribly, okay. Sure to change that. So what do you want to say, Brian? They hadn't met in the last week?
Yeah, or
Okay.
at least, yeah. It might have been even 2 weeks, but at this point, I can't remember.
So Maureen, he's talking about the second sentence of the first paragraph under liaison reports.
Yep, got it.
He'd like it to say, he mentioned that the finance committee did not meet this past week.
Okay.
And any other comments? Seeing and hearing none. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of February 11th, 2020 as amended.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of February 11th, 2020 as amended. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? That's unanimous. All right. Correspondence. So I actually found a whole bunch of things. Did anybody else have a chance to take a look through correspondence and have anything?
I looked through it.
Anything?
No, I was in finance.
Just a few things that we may be interested in. The moderator is appointing a charter review committee. He sent us a copy of the notice. He sent it, I think it got posted on February 14th. It expires March 11th. I'm unclear. I mean, we've all been talking about this for a while. I'm unclear about what motivated now. I'm thinking maybe we have him in at our next meeting and just say, hey, Dave, what's up? What are you thinking? What do you want? Yeah?
As it pleases the chair, I mean, if he has more of a reason other than, I think you're supposed to do it every so often.
You're supposed to do it once every 10 years, yeah.
And it might be that time.
That might be
around.
it. I'll email him, and if it's that simple, I won't bother wasting everybody's time.
With him leaving, that's the other.
Oh,
Yep.
Next week, I talked to Dave about this, other than it being a recurring thing with the town administrator moving on, he thought it might be a good idea to revisit it.
Well, let's save this, all the more reason I'd like to talk to him, because I actually thought it might wait till it might make more sense when we have another town administrator. But I'll email Dave, and if there's something to talk about, I'll bring him forward at the next meeting. My colleagues may want to know that Troop 1 is celebrating their 108th anniversary with a dinner, and that is on March 6th. And we are invited, and so I would like to have a volunteer go to this.
is it March 6th?
Is that what it says? I'm sorry, March 16th.
March 16th, yeah.
It says 6 up there, so March 16th.
Yeah, I've already got it penciled in, assuming that Don is not going to go, so if that's all right with my colleagues.
So you have it covered?
Yes, if it's
Okay.
acceptable to the rest of you.
Here's something very interesting. The town of Maynard is celebrating their sesquicentennial, that's 150 years, at a celebration on April 19th. And it's everyone will enjoy this. The correspondence from the chair of their sesquicentennial steering committee. As you know, it's personalized. As you know, Aspet Village, now Maynard, was a part of Stowe and Sudbury prior to 1871, and no celebration of our history would be complete without you present, which is very nice. It's sort of like inviting the Queen to a 4th of July celebration. So I think we should go. I'm going to.
When is it?
April 19th. So I think as many of us who can make it ought to go. It looks like that is well, it's from 2 to 4 p.m. I don't know what day of the week it is. Let's hope that's a weekend.
April 19th is a Saturday.
It's a Saturday, so
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Sunday.
Sunday. So we can pencil that in, and we can help our neighbors celebrate their separation from us and their independence.
Are you sure they're not going to make
Was it a
fun of us?
revolution, or did they quietly do a seat?
I don't know much about what happened, and to be fair, they actually took territory from us and Sudbury. So
swampland, I assume you gave them.
I also wanted to bring to my colleagues' attention that the MMA Mass Select Board Association is seeking board members. So if you're interested in this, there's details about the nomination process. I don't know what kind of work is involved with that, but that was in correspondence. I just want to bring that to everybody's attention. All right. All right, now we have a few items related to the appointment of a new firefighter. And first, the new firefighter has a family relationship with an existing firefighter, the captain. JP, you're here. Do you want to join us? When we were setting up the chairs, we forgot to put a chair here. Could you grab one? Nothing like doing it yourself. Thank you.
Oh, that's what the fire department does. You know, they take care of business as needed.
See you, Jim. So the candidate to be appointed is your son Erick, right?
Yes.
And do you know anything about, Chief Joe will tell us about the process for the hiring, but do you want to maybe summarize it if you know anything about it?
The only part that I played in the process was the setting the criteria for the full-time employment, reviewing the standards that we had back from the last hire, which was 15 years ago. And that was it. From there, the chief handled the rest of the process of resumes and interviews and the recommendation.
Right. Okay.
So,
And so you called the Ethics Commission, right?
yes, we did call the Ethics Commission.
Okay.
And I spoke with her.
And it is possible to have, well, and you're going to be, if he's hired, if we appoint him, you're going to be his supervisor.
That is correct.
And that's okay, but there's process has to go through. It's basically disclosure, and then we have to make a finding that we think we're going to get the same services out of you that we normally would. So I have to just ask you some questions. So he's going to be reporting directly to you.
That is correct.
Do you think in evaluating his performance you can be objective?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And if God forbid, he didn't meet the performance standards,
Then I go to the chief as my superior.
okay, do you see yourself treating him differently in any way?
I do not.
Okay. Questions from the rest of the board?
I was just going to ask him if he's going to treat him harsher. No, I think JP's a pretty fair guy that way, and, you know, but you also have high expectations, but
I do.
I take you at your word that you'll treat him fairly as well as everybody else, so.
So the captain has done 2 written disclosures, one under Chapter 268A, Section 23B3, which is the appearance of a conflict of interest, and then the other is under Section 19, which is what you do when your position involves supervision or something involving a direct family member or your financial interest. And then we have to make a determination. If there are no further questions for the captain, do I have a motion or any further comments?
I'll make a motion. We don't have a motion for the determination, but I'll make a motion that we determine that we do not see a conflict of interest in Captain Benoit supervising his son, should he be appointed a full-time firefighter.
Mr. Chair, may I, with a friendly amendment,
Yes.
offer that we've also determined that the financial interest that has been disclosed here is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of the services which the municipality, that being Stowe, may expect from the employee.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Do you accept the amendment?
I accept the very eloquent amendment.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Brian, seconded by Courtney. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Abstentions? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much,
you very
Captain.
much.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And now we can go on to the actual appointment. And is Erick here? Oh, and Chief Joe. You want to pull up a chair?
It's great. The more people we have, time we can need to pull up the chair.
Good to see you.
Nice seeing you again.
See you again.
Nice seeing you. Thank you.
Eric, how are you? Good. We've seen you before. Joe, do you want to maybe start us off, describe for people not involved what the process was? And
Yes. As the captain alluded earlier, this is our first full-time hire in 15 years. So I look back at the existing documentation and the information that we've moved forward and some of the stuff that's kind of changed in our industry that I've actually been involved in for other communities. The neighboring chiefs on a regular basis utilize other chiefs to assist in these process. So I took all the information that we had. We put an internal posting that yielded 8 qualified candidates. Out of those 8 internal candidates, we narrowed it down to 3 for interviews, and that was determined essentially by training, credentials, and tenure was definitely added to it because we had a number of them that were all very short tenure, but with the 3 that actually moved forward all had 9, 10, 15, 20 years in some cases as call firefighters for stuff. So that brought us to 3. At that point, I, with the assistance of 2 neighboring community chiefs, well, one's a little farther away, one was Wayland Chief, who is actually a retired chief of Sherborne, or he moved to Wayland from Sherborne, which is a similar department to ours, so I felt like they would have value, and the Boxborough chief. So we conducted interviews that were quantifiable data sheets that gave us scoring matrix for each of the candidates. Erick came out extremely well on the scoring compared to his counterparts. Wall did well, but he's definitely I would say an overachiever in the fire service. And with that, along with that, and I usually pride myself by not having to look at notes because I feel like I know these guys very well. But when I was going through his personnel file and some of the things I documented, I had enough that I felt like I would leave things out between, he's been a call firefighter since 2010, an EMT. He was a graduate of the call volunteer program, which is 240 hours, I think now, of nights and weekends at the fire academy after he did our internal program, which we've sent a number of people to. He achieved that firefighter 1 and 2 pro board certification from that. Then he's been a full-time firefighter in Weston and Devons already. So at that point, he's already gone through the full-time recruit training program, which is 10 weeks of full-time, essentially going through the whole thing over again and getting your rear end handed to you for another 10 weeks. He is a certified, pro board certified fire instructor. He's been a call lieutenant for us since 2017, which was another big step compared to the other candidates that had applied. He's been working as the training officer for the department since that 2017 appointment, and he is also a credentialed level 1 fire prevention officer. So as I said, I consider him somewhat an overachiever at his age in the fire service, which I felt was a perfect fit for us. As you know, we're a fairly small group that each member is essentially required to work independently, and I think he's going to be one of the best fits that we could have rolling in here. So
very good, thank you, Chief. Eric, that's pretty impressive. I think that was definitely worth listening to that summary. A little embarrassing for you, maybe, but it's got to be done. So,
Did they leave anything out?
I don't think so. Kind of mixes in there.
Anything you'd like to add?
No, there's been a long mix of stuff, and I've had a lot of opportunities to get me here.
Well, it sounds like we're very lucky to have you. The first full-time firefighter that we've appointed in 15 years. We're very lucky to have you here and to be filling this position. Mr. Burke.
I just would like to hear from our colleague, Mr. Ryan.
Well, you know, I've talked to Chief Landry about this, And, you know, I was very, you know, familiar with the process that he uses, and, you know, and then talking about Eric, he had a lot of good things to say also. So it's one of the things too, it's in a small town like this, you know, while we ended up just going through the whole conflict of interest thing, part of it is Eric's been involved in the department for quite a while. You were probably hanging around the fire station long before, I assume. And so, you know, it's a credit to, you know, it's nice to have people that have worked in or grown up in town stay in town. You know, that's one of the things that I really like about this town, is a lot of the continuity, and I think it's going to be a great thing, you know, for him to follow in his dad's footsteps, and hopefully your dad won't won't take it out on you, but I'm sure he'll be fair with you. And so I'm very happy to have you.
Courtney, anything?
It sounds like your family loves what you do, and that's just about as wonderful as it can get. We're lucky to have you. Thank you.
You sure you really want to do this? Because you have reported to your dad before, right?
Yeah.
This is a call firefighter, so you know what to expect.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right.
On the recommendation of Fire Chief Joe Landry, I move to appoint Erick Benoit as full-time firefighter EMT for the Stowe Fire Department, effective immediately and until June 30th, 2020, subject to reappointment at that time.
Second.
Motion made and seconded on the recommendation of the fire chief to appoint Erick Benoit as a full-time firefighter EMT to the Stowe Fire Department effective immediately and subject to reappointment after June 30th, 2020. Further discussion? Eric, thank you. Congratulations. All those in favor? I'm about to do that. Do it during the discussion part. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. And congratulations. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Oh, no, we'll ask. Do we have any family here other than
Actually, yes, we
the
do.
captain?
And
What's
could
the
we
picture say?
get a picture, and maybe his mom could pin his badge for him? Wow. They are a quiet group.
You doing the honors, Ann?
Yes, I remember my name.
Oh.
You're gonna get out of the chief.
Yeah.
Hold on, Ann's setting up.
Watch what you're doing, don't poke him.
Some of you may or may not know that his mother, Karen, is Kenny Eineson's sister, who was one of the first full-time firefighters that was hired in 1988
Oh,
with me.
wow.
So
And
his,
my father was on the department
yeah,
too.
Phil, her father was Phil, for the police. And,
Glad you're keeping the tradition going.
Your family should be very proud.
Thank you. Congratulations to all of you. All right. So our next item, it is after 7:15, is by charter, the town administrator is required to brief a joint boards meeting on the state of the fiscal year 2021 financial state of the town. Let me make sure I have representatives from all the boards here, or see what I have. I know I have someone from the Board of Assessors, I see Capital Planning, I see Finance Committee, I see Minuteman, and do I have somebody from Nashoba? Hi, Pat. And that's pretty good. Very, Bill, you want to take it away?
Sure. This is a requirement, as the chair stated, with regard to the charter and the bylaws. Oh, can't hear me. So annually, this time of year, second meeting in February, board meeting. And it's prescribed by identifying the groups that I need to invite to essentially give just a high-level overview of the upcoming budget year, identifying the part in the process that you play, because in some cases, like the Finance and Capital Planning Committee, they don't have a budget, they're looking at other budgets. But in the case of both the district schools, obviously, the two of them are big players for us. I don't have a budget until I have their numbers, to be truthful with you. It's hard to do the what-ifs. So both of them are identified as being participants in this, and the assessors are here essentially because on the revenue side of the equation, they have an important role to play in filling in what's called new growth. And I'm always anxious to get the number. Not that I exert any undue influence on the assessors or the numbers, but you know, the more they can predict in new growth, the better we're able to effectively balance a budget. So essentially, I hand it off at this point, and in the interest of those who are visiting, I would start with Minuteman, though you're local, but you won't have to stay beyond it, and then Pat with the 2 schools, and we'll go on to the others. So just an overview of, I mean, your assessment is it's in my budget. I've briefly identified to the board what the number is, met with the superintendent yourself, and I've forgotten a third person at that time that came to that, Bob. And because I was unable to meet them at Minuteman when they had all of my counterparts from the other town to go over the budget, because I had my own budgets to go through. So they came, and I appreciated it, and they gave me enough detail on the aspects of the assessment, especially on the expenditure side, because I understood what the drivers were on the revenue side, and they'll go through them again, but I was wondering what attempts were made to try to reduce expenditures, and they provided those to me, so. It's on.
So I'm also Minuteman rep, so I have been for a number of years. I believe the number is in the range of 18. The school building opened a year early. We had the kids starting in August of last summer, and we have projected that this year the freshman class will be 100% member town students, and that not every member town student will be able to be accepted because that freshman class is full. We will not be able to accept any out-of-district students in the freshman class, and the school itself will be full. So, first year. The debt service is, of course, a big driver of the budget increase, but it's something that was anticipated by the towns when they voted to build in the school. But it is split over 9 communities. Belmont, as you know, voted to get out of the district, and this is their last year of being a member. So next year, some 44 kids who've applied from Belmont will not be able to come to Minuteman. We do charge out-of-district students that are still there and matriculating, going out of the school. As they go through, they're going to graduate. Those kids, their towns are charged a capital fee as was approved at our request by the commissioner. That capital fee will disappear as the school becomes filled with member town students only. We won't be collecting the capital fee from those non-member students as a week on. Anyway, we are happy to report that the school is full and member town students. Stowe had 19 students in the school last year. We will have 36 coming up, and there are 12 accepted already and committed for next year. 5 more in the process, I believe, and 8 who we're waiting commitment from 5. Who have been offered admission, and 8 are in the application process. So next year we will have a lot of kids going to Minuteman. But that's a good thing. 66% of the kids graduating will end up going to college, which is pretty standard across the vocational schools. It's a slightly lower number than from the comprehensive high schools, but it is comparable. We have advanced manufacturing program that's full, which turns out, students who are prepared to take jobs immediately out of high school, and also are prepared to go on to engineering if they want to do that. So anyway, that's a brief summary.
Thank you.
Bill, would you mind if I ask Alice 2 questions?
I wouldn't.
Alice, now I forget what they were. First one, you mentioned Belmont, the 44 kids at Belmont would not be able to attend. Please forgive my rudimentary knowledge of Minuteman's procedures. I knew them better a few years ago. I would have thought that the kids from Belmont would be able to attend, but as out-of-district students, no?
There won't be any room for them because
There won't be
we
room.
have so many applicants from in-district students, we can't even accept all of them.
Okay. Second question, you said that for the out-of-district students, we don't get a capital fee.
We do,
Okay,
but it will,
Because
as we lose the out-of-district students as they get older and grow up and graduate, we won't be taking any more out-of-district students because we're filling up with in-district students, so the capital fees aren't going to come in.
okay, because I thought I remembered we used to not get a capital fee from
Right.
out-of-district, but DESE imposed
Right.
a rough estimate.
And we do get it now.
Okay,
And we will get it from the Belmont students who remain, like the sophomore, junior, senior kids next year, we will be collecting a capital fee from Belmont, but they're going to get older and graduate, and then we won't be getting anything from them.
great, thank you.
One other thing, we have a minimum number of seats guaranteed by our admissions policy for member town students. So that was built in primarily because I insisted on it, that minimum number of students per member town would be able to get into the school, and we wouldn't be frozen out of a building that we're building and we're paying
Right.
for.
Okay, Brian?
I just wanted to, with your, if not permission, acquiescence, Madam School Committee member, is to point out a couple of things that were developed at the presentation you and Superintendent Buquella made at the Finance Committee just a few minutes ago. And that is, I think our chair hit on it, which is in an age of unimaginable ironies, we worked so hard to get DES to institute a capital fee for out-of-district students, and it's not going to matter after another 3 years because the school is oversubscribed at present. It's a magnificent building with impressive technical accoutrements, but the old building had a capacity, if I remember correctly, of 930 students. But the new building is designed for a capacity of 628 students.
Yeah, that is correct. There were several of us who fought very hard to get the number to 800. The departing towns especially were interested in keeping the number low. They had no faith in the district's ability to build a school. A number of us who were paying more attention to the workforce development engines in this economy knew that it would be full and tried really hard. I can show the letters, I still have them, to get a much larger design enrollment. We were not successful.
I remember that discussion.
MSBA imposed 628 on us. That's how it happened.
Well, that just, first of all, if he's watching, we should credit our former chair, Charles Kern, for getting us in while there was still room. But it doesn't look as though non-member towns are going to have any access. And again, the irony is we're having more and more students, and I'll finish in just a second. But there's a big bump in the assessment this year, but a lot of that is driven by the fact that we're going from 19 to 36 students on a rolling average. Probably in the next couple of years it might be up to 50 because it's such a desirable education for our students. The last thing I'd like to say, and again, correct me if I've got this wrong, is that according to the superintendent, 90% of the capital costs that have been incurred and that have been financed for the new building are baked into this assessment. So if there's an increase in capital portion of the assessment next year, it'll be probably around 10%, no more than that.
He's going to send you the exact figures. I want to just make sure that he does that and send you the documents from the finance people over there. We have bonded all but something in the order of $3 or $4 million of the $144 million. So that's done. It was done to time with the market.
So I think this is all important. I want to let the town administrator get on with the big, but I think I want to make a separate agenda item, a Minuteman update. We used to have them every year, now we don't quite do that. Maybe there's some time coming up in March or April when we can even get the superintendent to be
Yep.
here?
You will have somebody from the school.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bill, sorry.
Pat?
Hi. I'm Pat Maroney. I'm the business manager for the Nashoba Regional School District. And I can kind of give you an overview of what the budget is going to be like for this year. It's going to be in excess of $58 million. We have not taken our final vote on the budget yet, so I don't want to get into too much detail because there could still be changes after our meeting tomorrow night or even prior to the final vote, which would happen before the 15th of March. This is a very lean budget. We take into consideration all three communities when we present a budget, and we want to make sure that we are in a position where our budget passes and that the communities can afford what we're putting forth. Some highlights, highlights, lowlights, whatever you want to call them. We've had a lot of, we've had an increase in special ed out-of-district placements this year, and we've also had a process that has been in place for a couple of years where we've been kind of spending down some of our revolving funds that had built up a little bit, and so you're going to see a slight increase there. Where we're not participating in school choice anymore, we're seeing a reduction in the revenues in that respect. So I think for the town of Stowe, the assessment will be reasonable in comparison to the other two communities. The overall increase is going to come in someplace around 4% for that, for the expenditures, but the assessments have other factors that are weighed in, and you'll see, I gave a number to Bill to plug into the budget and so that he could move forward. So, like I said, until tomorrow night, and when that's made public, that's about all the information I can give you on that. Do you have any other questions?
That was very succinct and pretty good numbers. We appreciate that. So thank you, Pat.
You're welcome.
Any comments, questions? Thank you, Pat.
So at this point, I think Kristen Fox, our principal assessor, can give you a quick overview of their role in developing and building the budget on the revenue side.
Yep.
And what she's projecting for the upcoming budget cycle.
Yeah. So for fiscal 21, new growth is down from the previous year. Fiscal 20, we had growth of over $800,000, which I think is unprecedented in Stowe. So, and that was again due to the Regency development over on Roxborough Road. Fiscal 21 is going to be the last year of growth from that project. It's done. It's completed. There was just a few condos left that weren't at 100%. They are now. So there's not a lot going on in the town right now. So we're relying on, building permits, cyclicals. There's a couple of lot splits, personal property growth. And the estimate for fiscal 21 is about $350,400. So considerably lower than last year, but in previous years, we run about high 2s, low 3s. So after that project was done, for the lack of new construction, we're back down to our normal figures, so.
Kristen, there's a development that's in some stage of progress on Walcott Street.
Mm-hmm.
Are you factoring that in?
Yeah, that's factored in.
Okay.
They're whatever percent complete those homes are. Yeah, they're in there.
Thank you.
There's 2. So.
With respect to the revenue side of the equation, clearly $500,000 reduction from last year.
Right.
But as is a fact, we can't spread the growth out. So
Yeah, it's a one-time.
we're able to take $800,000 in the revenue side of the equation on any year, we take it.
Sure.
But you have to anticipate the following year. I don't know that I was expecting a $500,000 reduction in that revenue, but she's not done her business yet, so I'm optimistic that we might gain
Find a
some
little
still.
more.
But that's the number. So the Finance Committee is well represented here this evening with their esteemed chair in the front. Rich, why don't you give us a sense of where you guys are in your process and what your process might be for those who aren't familiar with it with regard to budget development?
Sure. So we have a full 5 voting members. We'd love to get some more associates if we can. We've reviewed all the budgets that we've noticed that have had large increases in either expenses or well, it's really all expenses because I don't think there's any new hires this year, if I'm correct.
I won't be recommending any new permanent hires.
That's right.
In the requested budget, there's a handful of folks looking for it.
That hasn't been finalized yet, so we kind of prioritized based on where we saw the largest delta between expenditures and what's budgeted. We have come across a couple budgets that we think can be tightened up a little bit. And we just met with the Minuteman superintendent this evening to understand that sizable increase in the assessment that's coming from Minuteman. And we hope to meet with Brooke Clenchy and probably Pat, I think on the 10th, if we can, they can squeeze us in to learn more about what's going on with the school budget. And we've been meeting regularly in a working group with Capital to understand what's going on there. So things seem to be proceeding orderly and nothing too unexpected, although we'll see how it shakes out with the capital items. That's always the big budget driver.
Well, that's good.
No, I just wanted to augment what Rich said. The Finance Committee meetings are proceeding as orderly as possible, given the fact that I keep showing up. But I don't know if you wanted to take this opportunity to address that large transfer from reserves that was tonight.
Yes.
Because I know some of your members had some thoughts about that.
So we did have half our reserve fund was, we passed a reserve fund transfer this evening for the fire department. I think we're all thankful we can have another full-time hire, but it has been a strain on the budget trying to fill that gap. And so we had to spend that half our reserve fund this year to service that. That's why it's there.
Is it for overtime?
Yeah.
And call.
Yeah, just to cover. The chief can give you more details on that, but it was $33,000 and we have $70,000 fund.
Does he expect that to take us through the end of the fiscal year?
Yeah. But typically we have virtually all our funds at this point of the year, and we have $20,000 left out of the 70.
How does that compare to other years?
It's very unusual.
Okay.
Usually we have a decent amount being spent down, remaining. Last year we spent every dime down to like...
Well, I'm focusing on the fire department.
Oh, the fire, that never happened.
We had an individual, we have an individual that was out for months with medical.
Okay, I will just say, when I was on the FinCom, it happened all the time. So that's good that it doesn't happen all the time. And if there are extenuating circumstances this year, then that makes sense. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are we looking at a systemic problem as we were 15 years ago? Or do you think this is a one-off, or is it an unfair question?
No, I think it's a completely fair question. I mean, we've asked for 2 years now for an increase in the reserve fund, and Bill...
No, I'm focusing on fire department again.
No, I think that's why the fund is there, and I think, Brian sat through it, the rest of us read through it. It was a reasonable request. I think the reason Brian prompted me to say something is because we've requested to increase the size of the reserve fund for 2 budget seasons now. And, I think we're probably going to run out of money to service any other emergency funds. And it's been at $70,000 for as long as I've been on the committee, probably since you've been on the committee.
Through a lot of years.
I think it's important to note that for the last 10 years, and I'm going safely back 10,
Yeah.
the reserve fund has never, ever been extended. In fact, there's been years where there was 40 or 30 in the last 10. I don't have it with me, but it is true that there's been 2 requests by the Finance Committee to increase to 70,000, and all I said was there is no evidence at all, not only of a need for an increase, but they've been returning, and I've been using it for purposes, legitimate purposes, like snow and ice and the rest of it, but $20,000, $30,000, which is great. I don't have the luxury of taking accounts that are showing positive balances at the end of the year for decades and just increasing them when I'm cutting other budgets. You know, I go by the evidence and the facts. Now, it doesn't mean that something comes up in a given year. Hard cases make bad law, as you know. Guy's out 6 months with a heart problem in a small department where you have to pay to fill him in. It's public safety. We can run short. Larger departments can shift personnel. Happen to hit one where there isn't personnel to shift around. It's frontline public safety. That does happen. But the point of the matter is, at this point, we still have reserve funds available to us. The annual town, my fallback is always make it to annual town meeting, much as the Finance Committee will advise departments. Spend out of your expense until you've spent it all down, and then come to us, or hope you can get to the next town meeting.
So I would just say my interest in the item was strictly on the fire department. This board isn't going to take up any budget requests from you or any other department, because the charter makes clear that's between you and the...
Yeah.
I mean, I do recall this discussion from last year, and I recall pretty much what Bill just said. So you can take that up with him.
Okay.
But thank you. I was interested in the fire department thing just because that took me back to the old days when every year was $20,000 to $30,000 in overtime. And I may be exaggerating. I don't know.
Yeah, and to be clear, Bill, I'm looking at the numbers, we gave back like $50,000 a year for the last several years.
So let's move on.
Okay.
No more about FinCom.
No, I was just going to observe that one could say that FinCom now has the right type of leadership.
Okay, whatever. You want to take this?
Yeah. Anything else, Steve?
Thank you.
Thank you. Capital Planning Committee.
So let me just preface this by saying that a normal year for capital planning, if you look at the 5 years prior to last year, is about $581,000. Last year was an extraordinary year for capital, given a lot of reasons. We spent, the voters approved $4.5 million in capital. I don't think we need to go into the reasons why. I think everybody knows that. It had a lot to do with extenuating circumstances. Last year, at the town meeting in May, I projected that this year we'd be looking at capital expenditures on the order of $965,000 based on what the 5-year plans that folks had provided to us at that point. At the moment, we're looking at a capital request total of about $740,000. So things are getting better, but we're still not back to where we historically have been. There's a couple of things that are on that are sort of driving that. As usual, the biggest capital expenditures are for rolling stock. The highway department's looking to add another 6-wheel dump truck this year, and then also, coming forward in the next couple of years, they're looking at major pieces of equipment. There's a couple of road construction projects that are looking at needing some capital attention. The police department is looking to add another vehicle, which typical for them. The price of police vehicles has gone up, so we're looking at a little bit more money for police vehicles. But in general, we're kind of trying to get back to where we have been in the past. So
$754,000 on the books right now, I think.
well, you and I need to talk about one thing, but I think it's $740,000.
So that's essentially the overview.
Do you want to mention the school item that might be on the warrant?
I was really hoping somebody else might mention that.
All right. I guess you're out of luck.
I was thinking maybe the school department.
Pat, do you want to?
The elephant in the room. So you want to talk about the feasibility study?
I believe that's what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah. So, for those of you that don't know, the Nashoba Regional School District was accepted into the MSBA program for the consideration to build a new high school. And we went into Boston and went through all of the fanfare and everything, and we're one of 11 that were chosen for this year. And it's a very tight process. They have a schedule for you, and there's multiple modules that have to be followed. We are in what they call the eligibility phase right now, and part of the eligibility phase allows us to put before the towns the request for the cost of the feasibility study. The feasibility study is the study where they're going to look at the existing conditions of the building, education visioning, and recommended solutions based on the condition and education solutions for our needs. In doing so, the town managers have met and had come to the conclusion that probably the best time to put forth the request for the funding or the approval for borrowing for this feasibility study, which could be as much as $2 million, not to exceed. And that's where we are right now. We have some language that would have to be put forward on your warrant in May, and the townspeople will have to vote as to whether or not they want to approve such an expenditure for the possibility of building a new school. One thing that I just want to make clear, and Brooke and I have talked about this a lot, that we make sure that we say, even if we went forward with this feasibility study, and it's as expensive as it is, if at another time when we vote as to whether or not, or you as townspeople vote whether or not you want to build a new school, if you decide, no, we're not going to do this, then the school department would still be responsible to pay the note on the feasibility study. So in retrospect, if you move forward with the building project, there's a reimbursement rate that we're entitled to. And there's a wealth factor, everything included in that. And wherever that percentage lands, I have no idea where it would be at that time. That feasibility study would be reimbursed at that percentage. So although it may seem like it's a lot of money up front, if we go forward with the project, some of it will be refunded by reimbursement. And it's part of their module project process. At some point in one of the modules, they will reimburse us. So as far as our invitation, doesn't actually begin until June 1st. But again, like I said, they allow us to vote prior to that at the town level. And there's 270 days from that June 1st date, which brings us to February 26th to get an approval for the feasibility study. Now, I would say that the reason why we would have it in May is because we wouldn't want to have an additional town meeting across the 3 towns, because I know that costs money. And as it is, this is a lot of money to spend. So that's where we
Pat,
stand.
you briefed capital planning the other day.
Yes, I did.
It just sort of came up, and you were going to get capital planning some more formal information about it.
Yes, I
correct?
will.
Okay. Have you been in contact with our finance committee about this?
No, I have not, except
So-
I'm going to meet with them, Brooke, myself, and it's kind of a joint meeting that we're going to have in a couple of
And
weeks.
I guess, subject to you guys, you should just be prepared to talk to them about it, because they'll want to weigh in on it too.
Sure.
Questions about that from members of my board? Mr. Ryan?
One of the things is the timeline that we're looking at, I'll say to break ground and then complete something. It's multiple years, I know.
I know, it's probably up as far out as 6 years before the project will be completed.
That assumes that you get selected.
Approval, yeah, if we, well, that's another component too. After the feasibility study, they could determine that we're not really ready for a new project. It could be a renovation, it could be something other than what we, you know, like repair the envelope or whatever. Their approval is definitely key through the whole process.
Right. And that kind of leads into my second question, which is, I know that a number of years ago, we ended up doing a reno project there. Do you know when we pay that off, when that's done?
I believe that's paid off in 2025.
So what it does is it kind of coincides sort of when
Right.
that would end up being paid off.
Yes.
Yeah, I just didn't remember exactly when or how long, but.
Thank you. Ms. Frazier? Ryan, doing something?
I just, and I don't know, I beg the chair's indulgence, this is the appropriate time and place to bring this up, but just a quick observation. We're talking about perhaps $3.5 million to renovate Old Town Hall. The Randall Library, they're back now to the existing structure. I expect our chair will have some input on that on liaison reports. That might be another $5 million. And now we're talking about funding either a new school or an ad reno. And again, I don't care to engage in lengthy discussion, but I think we should observe for the benefit of the town that that's a heck of a lot of capital indebtedness being piled on possibly in the next 5 or 6 years.
Did you mention town hall?
Yes.
First
You did?
thing.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you. And Mr. Wrigley?
Statutorily, the towns will have 60 days from the date, we've been through this exercise before, but just to remind folks, they put us on notice under 7116D, I think it is. They take a vote whether to borrow funds or not for said purpose. Feasibility would be a borrowing. They then notify us within 7 days of said vote. We then have 60 days. And it's interesting the wording that the statute has. It's the district towns have 60 days within which time to go to a town meeting and vote to disapprove. In any event, important to keep in mind so that if we intend to have it before us for the annual town meeting, our warrant closes March.
10? What day does the warrant?
So Pat, you will want to make sure that we meet that deadline to get the language in.
March what?
6th.
And so we'll be able to meet the 60-day time bar for the vote to disapprove or not. And if a town doesn't exercise its right under the statutory provision, within 60 days, the presumption is you've approved it and then go forward in any event.
Mr. Ryan?
One comment along that. I'll say, a few years ago, we got notifications on some of these things that were timed essentially to force our hand. From my standpoint, I much appreciate you working with the town administrator now to make sure that you're not trying to force us to have a town meeting 2 weeks before our regular town meeting by doing these things. And it was a bone of contention a number of years ago, and right now I think, the relationship with the school district is much better, and I personally as well as appreciate it as well as from up here, so.
I think I might have told Pat about that at the capital planning meeting. Just along the lines that Brian was talking, I'm not so, I don't mean to sound cavalier about it, I'm not so concerned about a $2 million feasibility study split 3 ways according to the capital formula. What obviously is coming down the pike, though, prospect of a new high school, is pretty daunting. And not that many years ago, the district commissioned a study from NESDEC, which is a group of retired school superintendents that could not be more sympathetic to public schools. And the demographics, that they were commissioned to study the demographics of the 3 towns, including to build out. And the demographics showed declining enrollment through the 2020s. And it hurt the case, at least I thought it did, for a new high school. We had one meeting after that the superintendent attended. She's wonderful. And she didn't have I don't recall a specific, I asked, what about that study? And the rationale seemed to be more along the lines of, well, the building's just old. And I would like to really pin down the rationale for the high school before we go too much further, and possibly the feasibility study will help do that. Maybe it is time to re-examine that NESDEC study. My memory is that they assumed build out in all 3 towns. If they didn't, obviously that's a flaw, and it should be fixed. But I think it's a question that I and others are going to be asking is, if our best and most recent estimate of school demographics shows declining enrollment through the 2020s, and I think it does for all public schools, then let's be clear about the rationale for this before we get too far down the road. Mr. Burke.
I don't disagree with the chair. I just thought I could add some helpful information, which is Superintendent Quillen at the Finance Committee meeting informed us that NASDAQ just came down with their projected enrollments for the next year, and it looks as though the population in Stowe at least is flat. Do I remember that correctly, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Rich, you had a question before. I didn't give you a chance.
I was just going to mention that we're going to try to meet with them on the 10th and have capital planning join us for that.
Okay.
We just talked about that about 25 minutes ago. And the other thing was I just looked up at the copy of the debt schedule that I have that's most current, and the debt for the high school that you're asking about retires in 2027.
Okay, let's get back to Mr. Town Administrator.
We are. Just a concluding comment back to the Finance Committee's Reserve Fund woes. My position would be that, as I do this with other departments, the annual town meeting comes up the first week in May, so as we often ask departments to do the best you can with it. I'm happy to put an article in to allow you, for example, to the degree that you don't think you can make the end of the fiscal year, or you have some pending requests that you otherwise would fund but are worried about it, hold it, we'll replenish it, and I'll use stored assets to do that. They're available immediately at the annual town meeting. The other thing I would say is that if there's persuasive, part of my reluctance on the reserve fund is the historical data. I'm a numbers guy, and you've always had more than enough. Even in the tight years, in the end, you made it. But if there's a trend, and I didn't see it in the numbers, but that you can persuade me that going forward, your expectation is that this isn't a one-off because of an exaggerated circumstance we had here, which it was, but perhaps there's others that you foresee that we can't account for. But we've run short in the police department, for example, but we have enough personnel when they're out with injury to run short-shifted, and we make it. Couldn't do it here. That happens. But I'm not willing to take that one off, and all the money that was included in it. If you take that plug number out, the trend says 70 grand has been more than enough. But if it isn't, give me some backup. And I hadn't gotten anything from you with regard to the request. And when departments don't give me anything to back it up, and I got evidence to the contrary, I guess I decided for you what I decided for the others. You gotta show me, so maybe you can go back and get that information and bring it forward. I've got a few weeks, I'm happy to put some more money in, but I'll make sure that you make it this year, and if it looks like this is a trending increase in expenses over that's beginning, then I'm not one to stand on protocol. I'll be happy to.
Thank you very much.
Other than that, that concludes my joint boards. I appreciate all of you attending and participating.
Linda, do you have something related?
I was just thinking of technically that the warrant closes next Friday, and if the FinCom wanted to have a placeholder in, if they submitted an article that could be withdrawn but still made the March 6th deadline, or you would...
What I meant to say is I'll be putting one
Yeah,
in if they tell me they think it would be advantageous to them to give them the flexibility to make the end of the year. So instead of having to say no, say, as we often do to them, when departments come forward, the finance committee will say, look, take whatever you got for expenses and then come back and see us. I'll say the same thing to the finance committee, but if you don't think you can make it, then we'll put in a warrant article. We can pass on it, take no action, or pull it if you don't need it. But then we can just put a number in it by the time we go to print. But you just need to give me some input.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to the joint boards meeting. Appreciate it. Thank you. Next on our agenda is a discussion with the town clerk about while everybody's getting out of here, the chair is going to take a point of personal privilege just because I have been thinking about this, and I just want to say this. So 10 years ago, on the night of the town administrator's joint boards meeting, I was on the finance committee, and that was the night I decided I was done with town government. I had been involved here in Marshfield for 17 years. I just had enough. And in fact, I remember I drove to the meeting. I was going to go, and I just had enough. And I drove into the parking lot. I did a U-turn, and I drove out, and I went home and probably watched bad TV. And a week later, Steve Dungan called me up and suggested I run for selectman. And I said, Steve, I just decided to get out of town government. And he very calmly and rationally talked me into doing a 180. And just one of the reasons I still continue to miss Steve. That's it. Linda, do you want to join us?
Oh, sure.
You can ask Kathy about how hard it is to talk me into doing a 180 on anything. So this is related to the school district. Pat, I'm glad you stayed. For those watching at home, the school committee recently looked at population data and increased the size of the committee by 3. Is that right? Yes, 3. Going from 3 for Stowe, 3 for Lancaster, 2 for Bolton, to 4 for Stowe, 4 for Lancaster, 3 for Bolton. Town administrator and I met with a couple of school committee reps about why they were doing this. And it's basically because Bolton's population figures had fallen fairly far behind, and the conclusion was that they were either in violation of or in danger of being in violation of the constitutional principle of one person, one vote. So under the district agreement, and they've been advised by DESE, they believe they had the authority to expand the size of the committee. But obviously, the voters have to fill those vacancies. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight, because we already had approved the warrant for the election.
Right. And I just need that you have a second seat for that school committee, because right now we only have one school committee on that ballot. So that's all that is a technical piece.
Right. So as a result of this action, the ballot will have 2 school committee, 2 3-year terms?
Right. It'll be under the Nashoba Regional School District Committee vote for 2.
Right.
Because they're both equal number of, the length of terms are the same.
I'm going to take questions from members of the board, then I'm going to take some questions from members of the public. Bill Byron looks like he's going to pounce, so I think he's got a couple of questions. No? Okay. Oh, okay. Questions from members of the board on this? Tom?
I'm assuming that the ballots haven't been printed yet.
Nope.
Right.
Nope.
That's-
We are still handing out nomination papers. Nomination papers are available to the 24th. And the reason for the quick turnaround time to get the vote in is because you need a specific number of days from the, you need 15 days from the last day to take out papers to allow for this seat to be in here. So that's why the vote needs to be occur now, so that we can start passing out nomination papers for this second seat.
Makes sense.
Any other questions from members of the board? Mr. Burke?
Yeah, I appreciate the chair, the town administrator sitting down with the school committee, and this isn't directed at you, Madam Town Clerk. But has anyone actually looked at the regional agreement to see if this is consistent with what all the three-member towns agreed to?
Several people have actually looked at it.
Right here?
One of them.
I don't have to give you I just need to do the elections.
I mean, Bill and I, do you want to summarize it?
Sure, and Pat can fill in if she wants. I talked to the superintendent. When Jim and I spoke with Mary
McCarthy.
and the chair of the school committee, Kathy
Codian.
And this was respect to the statistical logic with regard to the necessity of doing this, not language necessarily in the district agreement as to process. This was just to substantiate the fact that Bolton was being rendered disadvantaged in the entire process of voting one person, one vote is to be fair. And so the DESE, through the person of Christine Lynch, provided statistics to the district. And then Mary was attempting to identify and then define and explain what the statistics meant, what standard deviation meant and the rest of it. And Jim and I think both arrived at the same conclusion, which is maybe just have Christine produce a narrative because this is her work, which was done. And she provided backup, including some on the constitutionality of one person, one vote, some court cases. So Jim and I and others got that information, and I was content with what it received. Now it's the question of the district agreement and what is expressed and or implied in the language, I'm speaking for myself, as to what process the school district needs to engage in administratively in order to facilitate going forward with a vote. And there's two provisions in the district agreement that I think are in play here. One is the first section, and it's 4 paragraphs, A through D, and then section 7 called amendments. And I had provided to Jim today that relevant information, and you could argue, if you wish to, at least 2 positions with regard to what might be required under the district agreement. I myself might arrive at a different conclusion than DESE did, DESE. And so I asked the superintendent to provide a copy of, because I presumed that the school district did contact an authoritative source on this, that they didn't just decide on their own. And it was the case that they did. They went to the DESE, as they did on the other one, which is the authoritative source. And Christine Lynch, who's I've known for decades, she's probably one of the longest working people still at DESE. And so I asked the superintendent, well, did she provide you something in writing that basically asserts what the school committee is saying, which is, under the district agreement, they can, by vote, decide to change the composition, including the number of school committee members, without a town meeting vote of the district towns. And she explains that that is the case from DESE's perspective, without necessarily amending the agreement. So if you take Article 1 and 7 relates to amendments. Article 1 relates to the composition of the school committee, and C and D the subparagraphs under section 1 are in play as far as this question goes. And D is instructive to the degree that the language is instructive, and it says, if the population in a participating town results in a change in the number of members to be elected to the district committee, such change shall be effective at the annual town election following certification of the census. So what it's saying is, it becomes effective upon the election in each of the affected towns. That's all it says. If you go to Article 7 for amendments, and this is amendments to the agreement, and it doesn't specify the nature or extent of an amendment, simply says amendment, all right? And it says, it concludes, provided that such amendment, if it's proposed, is approved by a majority vote in each of the towns comprising the district. Those are the instructive, what I just read to you. And so one says majority vote of the towns. It doesn't say town vote, doesn't say electoral vote. Under D, it does say effective, meaning it's in force and effect, but that doesn't speak to the essence of the question here, in my opinion, but that's what the district agreement says, is effective upon the annual town election following certification. I think you could, if you wanted to argue academically, or even in reality, that language doesn't give clear indication, I would say you could. All I will tell you is that I have in front of me what DESE stated it meant by what it said, and without reading its paragraphs long, they conclude and they instruct the district to say, you are able, okay, the district could update the number of representatives on the school committee to more closely align with the one person, one vote requirement without an amendment to the district agreement.
So I'm fine with it. The agreement could be written a lot more clearly. It says the school committee will look at this census data, and then it says, if the population in a participating town results in a change in the number of members to be elected. Very passive. It doesn't say who makes the change. It's just if it happens to occur organically. From the context, I don't know who would do it other than the school committee, who just looked at the sentence in the prior, who just looked at the census in the prior sentence. I'm fine with it. And the bottom line is the people elect the members of the school committee. So, I mean, it's certainly not worth making a big deal about. Mr. Berg.
Well, now that you just threw that last sentence in there, is there anything that stops us from just, from all three towns, just amending the agreement so that we can configure it the way?
I think that'll be done. At least I hope the school district urges us.
That's what it recommends.
And perhaps drafts, and that's what DESE has recommended.
Right.
Not at this second. It'll probably occur after the election. It'll, as Bill just said, it'll occur after the fact.
DESE is advising that after the fact, after the election, they advise that the school committee then bring to the towns for a town meeting vote what's already occurred. And I don't know which I could define as to why you would argue that paradox, but I won't. In any event, I will say this, that for me, it's all about fairness.
Yeah.
Leave aside, whenever it's difficult to clearly identify and define, I go to, okay, what's the purpose of the agreement in these provisions? It is fairness. They use one person, one vote, but you can't get precise on that. It's not something that lends itself to it. Accuracy may be a standard deviation, is as close as you get. But for me, and I don't know why they use residents instead of students, because in the rest of the agreement, when it's determining what we pay in our assessment, it's our percentage of the students, because they're the ones being serviced. Makes complete sense. It's logical. So I simply took that when I looked at this, and if this goes into force and effect with 344, Bolton will so they're getting one more member, but as are the other two. So the whole committee, all three towns are getting one. They will have representation, voting representation at the table in the form of a school committee member of 27%. They have students that represent 32% of the total. So they're still behind, in my opinion. But so we can make academic arguments, I don't wish to make them anymore, I'm good with it, but if anybody else wants to, that's fine. So
I'm trying to make a practical argument, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. Why can't we just put this on the warrant in all the 3-member towns this spring and just vote by majority to amend it? I just don't like to lose control of the amendment process in the agreement. That was my practical point.
Well, the school committee would have to do that. They'd have to take a vote to make that, to make this proposed amendment and then give it to the towns for vote. They haven't done that and they haven't chosen to.
Right.
So if you want to force them to do it, you can do that.
And they are going to do it in all 3 towns after this. So
Why after?
he just said, that's what DESE advised. So we could do that, and then we'd have to do it all over again. But if that's what you want to do,
No,
make a motion.
That's why we
Make a
can't do it,
motion.
because they're not advocating for it. They haven't taken a vote to do that. And they would have to take the vote and then inform us of that vote so that we could vote the amendment. They have to vote an amendment. They haven't done it, they're not going to.
You know, I understand everything up until that point, but I'm not going to ask for further explication. Thank you.
Do you want to make a motion?
I have a question.
I'm asking, just hold on a minute. Just, Mr. Burke, do you want to make a motion?
I'll think about it, but quite frankly, at this point, I'm just going to abstain.
Ms. Fraser?
Just on this whole discussion, I am curious if there's any cap on the number of school committee members, on the size of the committee.
What's that?
I'm curious if there is any limit to the size of the school committee.
So, I don't think so. I mean, they say...
No, so what you have in front of you is the first section of it, which is, this is all based on population.
Yep.
And so that standard deviation, 10 to 16% of the actual censuses that are supposed to be taken every 5 years, which hadn't occurred. So that would drive it. So as all 3 towns' populations adjust, okay, then dividing by the 3 communities with a standard deviation, so yes, it could grow to any.
So, can I offer 2 answers to Claudia's question? Number 1, we asked that and they said no, and in fact, some school committees have historically grown to 15 members. Nashoba, I guess, was much larger at one point.
Before this amendment, or this agreement was amended 10 years ago or so?
I think it's long.
It was within my tenure.
Yeah, it was like 13 or 14 members.
Yeah.
Right.
Huh?
I think 2003.
Yeah, so I think it went from 11 to 8,
And you would think,
if I'm correct in my...
that adding 1 more member for Bolton and making it a straight 3-3-3 would be the fairest thing to do. Yet, when you do the mathematical deviation analysis and you look at how far each town it would then be off from the ideal population, it actually turns out that makes the situation a little worse. So the only way, in fact, that's what Bolton assumed the answer was going to be. They were going to have the same number as everybody else. And they were surprised that actually the fairest solution turns out to be everyone gets 1, and they still have fewer than everybody else.
Thank you.
But
Mr. Ryan hasn't spoken yet.
Sorry.
One of the things, I actually see Brian's point, you know, I agree that you know, we should probably make the numbers fair, but in a lot of ways, I think that the way to make the numbers fair is to propose an amendment to the regional agreement and then put it into effect.
So that's fine. I assume you or Mr. Burke are volunteering to contact the school committee and have those discussions.
I mean, that is the case. This is otherwise an academic exercise. And they would have to vote to amend their agreement and then send said vote to us.
Because you need all 3 towns to do it
They
at the same
haven't done
time.
it. And unless they do it, I don't know, you can go to their meetings and tell them to do that.
Well, my only heartburn is that to go put this into place and then go and ask the town people to vote on it, and if they say no, it's, well, too bad, so sad.
Have to read them.
You know, the proper way to do it is if the school, I think if the school committee feels that this should happen, what they should do is make the proposal that we amend the agreement, and I'd be in favor of it.
So I just argue that they would argue that the district agreement doesn't require it.
Right.
This is your version of your understanding of it, and then we get into what? Going to court, going to DESE?
And they have
Because they're
support
saying
for that.
DESE is saying you don't need to amend. I'm saying I might read it differently and you might read it differently, but you don't have the authoritative source. Now, it is true that if you don't like what they're doing here, and you can't persuade them to your viewpoint, you're going to have to sue somebody.
Well,
and I just don't see
so
that.
the thing that is immediately before us is Linda's request that we amend the warrant to add the second school committee member. So I guess, flowing from what you and Mr. Burke are saying, is that you'll be voting no on that.
I haven't said that. I just have heartburn about asking people, you know, which has been recommended by DESE
But
to...
here's what I'm saying. We have a thing before us tonight. I want to move to it. Vote. Then we have a related thing, which is convincing the school committee to amend sooner rather than later in all 3 towns, talking to them about why they're not doing it. Why don't we deal with the thing we got to deal with tonight? And then if you and Mr. Burke believe that, you can take that up with the school committee, or at least our representatives. I've been in touch with our 3 representatives over this whole thing. I mean, we all have their emails, and you can take it up with them. Or you can, and/or vote no on the, I just want to keep the meeting moving along. I've been looking at this for 2 weeks, fairly satisfied. But like I said, and like Bill said, the language is poorly written and ambiguous. So I'm not worried about it because I understand the ultimate goal of what they're doing. But if you're more concerned about the mechanics of it, I respect that. But let's get on with what we got to do tonight, and you can, at the liaison, you can take that up and report back next time.
Well, then, I think the chair should call the question if everyone has had their thing.
Mr. Chairman, I move to add the following position to the ballot for May 2020 town election. Nashoba Regional School Committee member for a 3-year term expiring May 2023.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to, may I see the motion? I don't have that. Thank you. Motion made and seconded to add a position to the ballot for the May 2020 town election of Nashoba Regional School Committee member for a 3-year term expiring in May 2023. Further discussion? You guys good with going to vote on this? Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against, vote nay. Abstentions?
Here.
3-0 to 1.
Great.
And then I guess...
Sorry, ma'am.
No, it's okay.
And I guess we can take up... Do you guys want to pursue this with the school? Pat, don't leave yet. Do you?
I don't think... The only thing I'd like to ask is, please take this back to the school committee and say that at least half of us felt that it could have been done in a different manner. All right, you know, given the ambiguity in there, I'm okay with it. I'm from a fairness standpoint, and if we didn't have such a good relationship with the school district right now, I might have felt different.
Pat, can I suggest, the chair's name escapes me, Kathy?
Kathy Codian.
Kathy's been very good about this whole thing.
Sure.
Could, why don't I share her email address with Brian and Tom? And I can urge them to reach out to her to discuss this.
We already have it, it's in the packet.
You got it. Then I would urge, then let's leave it at that. They will reach out to Kathy if they want to pursue this. And yes, as Tom said, bring it back to the committee and let them know that there was some agita from at least half the board.
Or,
and
does the chair wish to put this on agenda to have somebody from the school committee come here and explain why they want to do it backwards?
See, but they don't believe they're doing it backwards.
You're
This is
making
what
them
I'm telling
wrong.
you.
Make them wrong.
They have DESE saying you're doing the right thing. This is what we're telling you can do. So you're going to start from you're not starting from the position where they're going to agree they're doing the wrong thing. They're going to say, we respect your opinion and your interpretation, but DESE tells us we can do it this way, and this is what we're doing. What
Let's
are
do
you
this.
then going to
Let's do
have?
this. Pat's going to take this back to the committee as a whole, and you guys have the chair's email address. Pursue it with her. If after pursuing it with her, you feel like it's something you'd want the whole board to consider, I will put it on an agenda. Okay? Just let me know. I think first, discuss it with her and see where that goes. Okay?
You all set?
Yes, all set. Thank you, Linda.
Great.
Sorry to keep you so long.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm staying a little longer. I want to hear Doug's.
Okay. So now we have two things that are related. Jesse, you can come on up and join us. Jesse's going to describe for us this new intermunicipal agreement for making the connections, and then our town council's firm is representing multiple sides in this agreement. We have a finding to make on that one. Hi, Jesse. Hi.
So just as a clarification, I don't have an IMA with me tonight, mainly because town council still is looking for the disclosure so they can really take a look at it. So far, only Sudbury's council, who is also KP Law, has looked at it. So as long as that's okay, I was under the impression I could give you an idea of what the program is, so by the time we get to the IMA, we have a clear idea of what we're talking about. Does that,
I think
sound okay?
we have the fairly lengthy summary here.
Yep.
And it sounds like it's primarily a pilot project.
It is.
Okay, and it sounds like it's primarily looking for money from whom now? The state?
So towns of Sudbury, Carlisle, Stowe, Acton, I think Bolton and Boxborough got a community compact grant from the state. That's correct.
Okay, and basically this is going to be a study to see what the demand is and where it is and what routes might work out in the various towns. And there's going to be a steering committee made up of people from all the towns.
Yep, there's a steering committee of which I'm on. Sudbury is the grant host. They're the ones who will disseminate funds to communities that decide to put forth a pilot project.
And the purpose of it is what I'll call on-demand transportation for seniors, people with disabilities.
It's to fill in the gaps the COA either can't meet right now or isn't when they're not running. You know, various medical trips, just a way to offer another transportation option. Yeah.
That's very helpful. Understanding that. I mean, I'm not saying that the goals aren't helpful too, but I'm just saying that's what we lacked last time.
Well, I agree with Mr. Burke that understanding what this agreement is going to, yes, stop right there. Understanding what this agreement is makes making the determination about John and Barbara much easier.
And if the chair will forgive me, what is it John and Barbara are going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it could be not much at all, but from my understanding, all they were going to do was what we typically do with an IMA is they look over it. You know, we've drafted it as a steering committee. We've actually used some other examples that we have. Then the different towns were looking over it, but we realized Sudbury and Stowe both use KP Law, and they're obviously representing two towns that may have different interests.
They're going to be drafting it or parts of it.
Well,
and
more
reviewing it.
specifically, and I talked with Barbara up front about this, because I was concerned that we'd be having multiple attorneys at the same firm looking at the same draft, charging clients for the same thing. I'm not saying that's what would have happened, but it's not going to happen now. So the fact of the matter is, someone's assigned within the firm to mark up the draft and then give it to the affected attorneys in the towns that they're sharing the same thing with, and say, look, if you got anything more to say, fine. Otherwise, let's get on with it.
So what's before us tonight is not approving and signing the IMA because we don't have it, but just making the finding with regard to John.
Exactly. As soon as I get the comments back from Sudbury, I'll distribute that I think they're looking for the disclosure just to be able to start the process. So that's pretty much it, yeah. So
Further comments from, and then I have something I want to say. Well, anybody other than Mr. Burke?
I was good with it last time. I'm supportive of understanding better what we're seeing, but,
Ms. Frazier, the shrug you gave me was ambiguous.
It seems to me from what I've read that it could be possible that it could be conducted in a manner that would not be, I'm trying to emulate Mr. Burke's speech.
Why?
Disadvantageous to us.
you're not going to make any friends.
Why the hell?
Of all of this, there's like
It
five
sounds
of us
like it'll
in
work
here.
to me. I don't think there'll be much of a conflict.
Okay, that was perfect. And Mr. Burke?
How much money is at stake here? I see $80,000.
Sure.
And is it going to be split up between all the member towns? Is that it? Is that the idea?
Some portion of that would be, yeah.
So I'm going to get cranky for a second. This is another one of these MAPC magic things, right?
Not in the way that I think you mean. MAPC has offered to kind of help keep all the communities at the table together, and they've offered some expertise, but it's really been more of the towns together, especially with their some of their COA folks. Town of Sudbury have some really helpful volunteers. So this is slightly different, but you can go. I don't know if there's more to the.
Well, no, I mean, in the tenure I've been on this board, I've just seen so many things. Either it's housing, or it's agriculture, or it's this may be the first transportation one, where there's going to be a study, there's a grant, people from MAPC, Magic are going to be doing a pilot, they're going to be looking at X, Y, and Z, and then nothing happens. Yeah, I remember the first one I was all excited about. It was something to do with agriculture. It sounded really important, but absolutely nothing happened, and in fact, most of the farmers in town didn't even know what was going on. I'm skeptical of not their good faith or their efforts so much as what does it really translate into down the road. Here, I have a layer of skepticism that comes from, number one, we have a council on aging that provides these very services to part of this population, but they do it very well and they do it for free. And I'm struck as I've read through all of this how many of the problems that are trying to be smoothed over here are caused in a way by over-regionalization. It kept talking about how we're at the intersection of 2 or 3 RTAs, and that's part of the problems that, you know, nobody's coming up with routes that go through the various jurisdictions of the RTAs, and they want to do this. I understand that, but I guess I would love to see something like this actually happen, but my history on things like this makes me skeptical, so that's my cranky speech.
I thought we weren't going to consider the agreement, just whether or not to allow.
I just want to get cranky.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
If I can respond just to.
Yeah, please.
This is markedly different than just a study. This is an action, we would be proposing, and I've been working with our town social worker and with the director of the COA, who are both excited about the prospect here. There's a lot of details, but we'd be proposing an actual program that would allow folks who right now don't qualify for some of the ride services that are out there, or simply have schedules that don't jive with what the COA is offering, a way to get a subsidized ride on demand to meet like a medical appointment, or to do their shopping if they rely on that, who literally don't have transportation or don't have the actual means to utilize it. So I think there's actual tangible benefits that are a lot different than some of the other studies, which I'll share some of your kind of hesitations on sometimes.
Okay, and that's
so
related to this, or sort of motivated
that is what
by?
this pilot is. So what the town would be doing is saying, let's get together, let's get a little bit more data on the kinds of rides people are looking for, what their barriers are to getting to where they need to go. Let's identify a small subset, and let's create a very small pilot that helps them get a cheap ride from somebody like Uber, Lyft, or a taxi service that we have a contract with to provide them a ride.
Okay.
And then that would be something that we could eventually scale up. What's nice about it is it doesn't require a lot of dispatch services. It's It's basically something that a lot of these folks can call up, and once they qualify for the program, they can use it as they wish. We would have a pot of money to help subsidize the ride. The big question is what happens if it's successful? Do we subsidize that further? What does it look like? And those are the kinds of questions we're trying to.
Okay, my crankiness is
Way
mitigated.
to push back, Justin.
No, that's good. My crankiness is mitigated. I feel even a sliver of optimism, just a sliver. So that's great. I would love to see something like that happen on this.
Mr. Chair, I move that the selectmen sign multiple representation disclosure form for KP Law granting permission for that firm to advise the town of Stowe on the Making the Connections Intermunicipal Agreement, given that there is an appearance of a conflict of interest.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to authorize the selectmen to sign a multiple representation disclosure form from KP Law, giving them permission to advise the town on the Making Connections Intermunicipal Agreement. Further discussion?
Next time you want to move things along?
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to argue that we should have moved it along, because I'm going to argue against it later, but this is fine. You were picking on the on the potential agreement.
Yes.
I was going to say
all that
lots of
stuff about moving
about
stuff
it.
along applies to you guys, not me. Okay.
Now I understand. Thanks, Jim.
Get with the program, Tom.
All right.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? And that is done. We will, is this the thing? Yes.
Power of crankiness.
At least I was honest. Called it what it was. All right. Jesse, thank you very much, and thanks for the information on it. I look forward to seeing the actual agreement.
Thank you.
We have come to the portion of the evening everyone looks forward to, liaison reports. Let's keep in mind we have an executive session, and we'll start with Mr. Burke.
It was made today during the course of the joint boards meeting, the presentation. Finance, I appreciate the town administrator addressing the finance committee's concern. It was expressed very passionately in the meeting, and I thought it needed to be addressed. Thank you.
I don't have too much. I don't have anything to say on the library. The library building, the repurposed library building committee will meet soon. Obviously, it's going back to its original purpose, which is to hire an architect and start doing concept design on an expansion renovation of Randall. Working informally with Jesse, Allison, Bill on a commuter van. Haven't had a lot of movement on that, but Jesse has a meeting tomorrow, I think, with Mart, and we may get things shaken up a little bit there. And I can't add anything on capital planning other than what you heard from Steve tonight. Mr. Ryan.
I'm good.
Ms. Frazier.
Going to a smart meeting tomorrow?
Try to talk like me.
This is the second thing I heard tonight. It scares me.
That won't be happening.
All right, I will accept a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of considering the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate. We will not be returning to open session.
So,
Because I have found that the discussion in open session will have a detrimental effect on our possible negotiating position.
so move.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing purchase, lease, value of real estate. This is a roll call vote.
Who should be included in our discussions, if anyone?
Not Ms. Hathaway, other than that, everybody else. And
Smart is meeting down here tomorrow.
Thank you.
this requires a roll call vote. Ms. Frazier.
Yeah, aye.
Aye.
Mr. Ryan, Mr. Burke.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. We are in executive session. It may be easiest